All right. So welcome. This session is motivating and supporting reluctant writers with WriteReader. We're going to spend some time just kind of on WriteReader basics, and then I'm going to share a couple of ideas I found that I really love just for kind of, well, exactly what the title says, motivating and supporting some of those writers that are reluctant. I've just loved seeing kind of the sparks that start to fly once they get going in this. So I'll share a couple of those ideas that I found to be really helpful. My name is Traci Piltz. I'm in Billings, Montana. I am a WriteReader ambassador. My day job is for our district. I'm a tech integration specialist. I work mostly with our kindergarten through third grade teachers and students. WriteReader is one, though, that works with any grade. So I've had the opportunity to go into even some of our intermediate classes and show them how to use WriteReader. So that's one thing I love about it, is just how adaptable it is for different subjects and grade levels and all that kind of stuff. So in my role, I get to, I'm the opposite of you. You get to be at home and do virtual. I like drive all over town all day. Sometimes I wish I was at home, but I drive all over town and just go into classrooms and support our teachers and students just in using technology. So I've really had the opportunity to be able to show WriteReader to a lot of our teachers and our kids, which is kind of fun. And like I mentioned, I knew of it kind of like you. I knew of it and had used it a tiny bit. But when I taught first grade remote, is when I really kind of dug into it and used it a lot and really enjoyed it with remote learning. So we're going to kind of chat through the basics a little bit. If you have any questions, again, unmute or put them in the chat. Talk about the writing and reading utility settings, which I think can be really awesome for supporting some of those struggling writers and readers. Ways to sort of spark that motivation and engagement. And then there's some resources at the end of this presentation. And I'll share a link to this before we're done too. So WriteReader basics. One thing I love that I don't think I put in here is I really like how easily it works no matter what device I'm on or my students are on. That was one of the big things that drew me to it when we were remote. Our students were supposed to have iPads, but some of them didn't. Some of them were on a Chromebook. Some of them were, using whatever computer their mom or dad had at home. And it was really hard to try to manage if they needed something specific. And I really loved that this program worked. Whatever device they were on. There's not an app, it just pulls up in the browser. So it worked so well when we were remote for all of those devices. So students are going to be able to create books and they can add text, images, audio. So there's some great multimodal tools in there. I like how easy it is to share. Via the class bookshelf, automatically they'll be able to see one another's books by default. And they really love that. Building those connections with your students, I think, will be really great. Without you having to do anything, they'll just be able to look at what each other is writing, not edit, but read it and view it. There's some awesome supports in there that we'll look at a little bit more closely, some speech synthesis, educator text tools. And then again, you can make those shareable with a link, and that makes it available for anybody to be able to read those books. They don't have to be a part of your class or sign in. So families, other classes can read those books really easily. You already have an account, I know, Sheila, but if anyone watching doesn't have an account, you can get started for free at app.writereader.com. What you'll see is it will automatically create a class for you called My Class. Be sure to click on settings. Sometimes I think because it's there, I know a lot of teachers I work with just kind of get started and don't click on settings and kind of see what types of things are in there that you can change. You can change the name of your class in there and alter some of the settings in there too. You'll add your students. Just in the students tab. You can enter their names and it'll generate a username for them and then a class code for your class. You'll notice that there's a little login card that has their username and class code. And then it also has a QR code that will easily sign your students in. So depending on what type of device your students are using, maybe how old your students are, there's a few different ways that they can sign in. The first thing your students are going to do is just get started making a book. So the plus sign is kind of down in that bottom right corner down there. That's where they can click plus and just choose their book type. With a free account, there's just one book type. If you do upgrade to a premium account, there are these, and here's a little example. These books that are landscape are a picture book. And what those are is it just is exactly what it says, a large picture. And then text can be added as labels or little speech callouts. I find those really nice for some of the younger students, or if we just want to really focus on the picture. The very first time I introduce it to them, I usually leave it fairly open-ended. I know a lot of teachers I work with want to give them a specific topic or something to write about, but I really do find that when you leave it kind of open-ended, but give them some expectations, they really just get in there and kind of explore and click around and find all of the good stuff in there. Um, Sometimes I'll give them something general like you're studying animals. You could make a book about animals or, things that you love. So letting them pick a topic that's of interest to them just so that they can really get familiar with the tool and kind of explore what's in there, I think is super helpful. When you're on a page, it's pretty straightforward and simple. One of the things I really love about WriteReader is there's enough in here that students absolutely love it. They have ownership, they have, they can customize, they can make it theirs, but there's not so many things in here that they get distracted and overwhelmed. I've used tons of programs with students as an integration specialist. A lot of what I do is just kind of go introduce tools and programs to teachers. And some of them, even though they're awesome, can be kind of overwhelming for students because there are so many choices. So I really loved this kind of clean and simple layout and how it really helps students focus on what the objective or what the goal is, which is writing. So on the page, you'll notice what they can do is add text, they can add a picture, and we'll look more closely at that in a moment. They can add their voice with the microphone. I find that a lot of kids kind of skip that part unless I really talk about why it's important. And we talk about it's important as a author to go back to the beginning of your book and read the words that you wrote and make sure that they make sense, check for errors, see if there's any details that you want to add. So we talk about how just rereading it is so important. And then a lot of kids have said, which I thought was great, maybe we want to share them with the kindergartners, or maybe we want to share them with the first graders. And then if my voice is in there, they can just listen to the book. So I think that's another great point, and I love that they kind of come up with that on their own. And for me as a teacher, I like knowing that they didn't just kind of put words down, that they can go back and read it to me and remember what they wrote too is really important to me. Um, this educator writing piece here is something that's pretty unique to WriteReader. I always sort of think about when I was in a kindergarten classroom, I taught kindergarten for 12 years. When my students wrote in their journals, I would usually go around and try to conference with them and just kind of make some little quick notes in their journal. To me, that's what this space is. So the students would write here, down here is a space for me if I need it. Maybe I write correctly the sentence that they had attempted to write up here. Maybe I just write a quick note. If I'm using it as like a template where I want to send a template to my students, sometimes I use that as a word bank or a space where I could put directions for what I want them to do. So I feel like this is a nice tool. I don't use it every time. I don't use it on every single book, but I think it is a nice tool to have available. And then, of course, delete the page is down there as well. One thing I'll point out, I hope you can see what I'm circling here, but a lot of times kids think they click on that arrow down at the bottom, add a page, but it's this plus sign here. So the plus page is where they'll add their next page, and then they can choose what type of page that they want to add. The feedback and support, again, I think is really unique. That educator text field that we looked at, here's an example of what that could look like. The student wrote it up top, and then the teacher could go through and write it correctly on the bottom. It's not to tell the student like, oh, you didn't do this correctly. It's again to make that note on there. Maybe if I'm sharing this at a conference or something, I want to be able to have the parent be able to look at both pieces. You'll also notice this little speech synthesis button down there. That also means that once I type in there, the student can click on it and listen to those words being read. So it's also a great way of them being able to hear that sentence, see what those words look like when they're written out and spelled correctly. And then the feedback tool is that little speech bubble over there. And you'll notice there's a little red bubble if I put feedback. So if I'm making edits in there and I want to tell them, double check this, or maybe you want to think about that. If I put that in the feedback, when they log into WriteReader, they'll see a little red bubble and they'll know to click on that and look at your feedback and make some edits. There's a couple of links here, and again, I'll share this presentation with you. A couple of great posts here about creating meaningful feedback and how to write meaningful feedback, and then some really nice examples of how to use feedback in WriteReader. I really love this little screenshot. The teacher down here where they gave feedback, asked, what are your goals? And then said, check out this link. I love that they gave them that follow-up. Click on here, maybe it'll come up and it'll generate some ideas, and then you can come back in and add it. So I really loved that example of providing real specific feedback to the student. These writing and reading utility settings, which again, you'll see up in your settings when you're in your WriteReader account, give students some really awesome supports. And I think sometimes they get overlooked or hidden in there. By default, a lot of these are on, but something I really love is I can go in my settings where it says writing and reading utility settings. I can decide which students need these. And if they don't, then I can turn them off for certain students. So here you'll notice when we click on that kind of little gear on the WriteReader page, this menu comes up over here where it'll let students turn on key sounds, letter sounds, or read words and sentences aloud. This is really helpful, I think, in a room full of kids where I feel like half the time when I'm in there, I'm walking around and they're saying, how do you spell elephant? And so I'm kind of trying to help them stretch out those words, especially if you're remote and your students are virtual and maybe there's not somebody there to help them with that. This would be a huge help. No matter which ones you have on, the key sound, as they're, typing, it's going to say the letter names or the sounds. So if they're typing elephant, it's going to start stretching out, elephant, and tell them if they're writing that correctly or not. So it's really that nice support. They can be listening. And then if the read words and sentences aloud is toggled on, when they hit the period, and it knows the sentence is complete, it'll go back and read that whole sentence. So it's a really nice way of giving students kind of that immediate feedback and support if they're struggling with kind of stretching out some of those tricky words. And then this is just kind of a screenshot showing you what those settings look like. Again, it's in up where your class settings are. There's class settings, book settings, student settings, and then here's these utility settings that we're looking at. So here are all the things available, and then you can select which students, if you want all of them to have access, or if there's just certain students that need some of these support tools, you can decide, which that part is really cool too. I briefly mentioned template books. This is another thing I use a lot for maybe struggling or reluctant writers. Um, the template just might give them a little bit of a start on what I want them to do, or maybe it'll help them organize their thoughts a little bit so that they can get going. So there is a template library in WriteReader. Click on this here. You can search the template library. So there's some examples here. Oh, my screen is loading really small. But you'll see that there's some examples here. So if I click on, let's say this one, it'll show me this template and I can kind of look and see this one in particular. It already had the images there. It's just kind of spacing first, next, last. And then you'll notice I use that educator writing field to put some, like a word bank there as they're trying to write. So I could say use, and this will show up in my WriteReader account use with my students. Some of them are more, just kind of clicking on random ones here. Some of them are a little bit more open-ended where really, again, I'm just kind of providing a sentence frame or a structure for students. So you can browse and find ones that are already created, or you can easily make them. Oh, my cat wants to join the fun here. You can easily make them yourself just by creating a book in WriteReader. So you click, you're signed in as a teacher, click on the plus sign and make whatever book that is that you need. There's a little link right here to kind of show you how to create your own. And then once you have it created, you just toggle, I think it shows you here in this next one. Nope. There's just a little toggle button at the top where you'll toggle the template on. And then when they click the plus sign, those templates will be one of the options. So instead of making a blank book, they could choose that template. So again, a nice way to provide a framework for what you're looking for, maybe provide some vocabulary if that's helpful, just to kind of help those students structure their thinking and help them get started. There's another example here. This My Learning Journal is kind of nice. It's sort of a nice end of year one too, just to kind of start to reflect on what they've done throughout the year. But tons more examples and ideas in that template library. So I'll just pause for a moment and see if you have any questions about what I showed you. I'm going kind of quickly just through those basics so that we can get into some of these other ideas. But any questions, go ahead and let me know either in the chat or you can unmute. I'm happy to show you something if you want to see something.
Nope, so far it's really good. I'm taking notes. So,
Good, awesome, glad to hear it. Um, so why is it important to spark students' motivation for writing and reading? You can share any ideas you have if you want in the chat. I know, being in so many classrooms, I just notice such a difference between students when they're excited about something and they want to do something. The effort that they put forth is so much greater because they want to do it, right? It's something that interests them and they've made a connection with. So writing, I think, is a huge piece where if they're just writing about stuff that isn't meaningful to them, or if they're always maybe just writing on paper, I think writing on paper is great. But if they're always writing on paper, they need something to kind of spark that interest and motivate them a little bit, especially when they have choice. Yep, I absolutely love that. When we're not just saying, here's exactly what you'll write about, here's your topic, and everyone's turns out the exact same. That's part of what I love about writing is it does just lend itself so well to differentiating for all different learners and just sort of all different topics. So sparking that motivation, I think, is really key to getting quality writing from our students. So the best way that I found, or I guess the first way that I found is just these images. They really, really love the images in WriteReader. I just want to get into this image category here. So when I click on images, across the top, they have this great image bank. And this is how I usually hook students the very first time. I just kind of sit here and click through these. And there's always something that excites each one of them. And I just kind of show them, like, look at all of these images. I'll show you the one that always, I usually do it last because then they erupt. But this one right here, especially second grade boys, gets them so excited. I've seen some of the most amazing books written about Minecraft strategies and how to create their pickaxes and all that kind of stuff. The detail that they put into that writing because it's something that they know and something that they love. So I love just kind of scrolling through here. Another popular one is this one with all the animals. I usually show them this. So I usually start with the image bank because these are embedded, they're right there. They're Pixabay. I know they're copyright free, so it's okay for the kids to use them. They're filtered. Um, so usually I show them this first and just kind of tell them, click around in there, get some ideas, spark some interest. And they usually get going pretty quick. The search tool is also helpful. Again, this is also powered by Pixabay. So we know that they're copyright free images that our students can use. So it's a nice little digital citizenship conversation as well. But they can also search in here and find images if they need some additional images. And then I love that they can also use the camera or upload. So if they have things on their device, they can upload it in there. If they want to take a picture, I've seen some cool ideas. My friend Katie Gardner, who I believe she's in South Carolina too, um, she's done some really neat books, like a tour of the school, and they take pictures around the school or a tour of the classroom. When I was remote, something I really loved was because one of the advantages was they were at home, so they could find, the things in their home, making math stories with, their squishmallows, and they could take pictures. Or just different things, incorporating stuff in their homes that they love. Tell a story about my cat keeps trying to jump in here. Write a story about your pet at home, and they can add real pictures of their pet. So images, I think, is a huge motivating factor and super easy to access images or add images in WriteReader. This other one is an example here of taking pictures. The students had written all of these books. I think they just made up stories for this one. And then we published them in WriteReader after they'd written them on paper and just took pictures. So we took pictures of all their drawings, took pictures of their writing, and then they added their voice. So we have this digital version with the audio and with those pictures in WriteReader that was really special. And again, I think adding that audio piece is so powerful. The fluency piece, making sure that they can go back and read what they wrote. I think it's a really great, they like listening to audiobooks. And so when they realize they're making an audiobook, I think they think that's really cool. And if they know that their classmates can access the books that they're making and then just listen to those books like an audiobook, that's a pretty neat thing. So going back and adding those voices, I think, is another real motivator. And this is just a link. This is another one where they were doing book reviews of their favorite books that they've written. And then again, pictures of those drawings that they had already done. And I think you mentioned this or that choice, same thing, that ownership. Um, when they have that choice and that ownership and they get to choose what they're writing about or find things that spark interest to them, um, I'm sometimes amazed at what they'll come up with. I have teachers who will say, since you came in and showed this to our kids, like, this is what they want to do all the time. We have to be sure that, they actually get off so that they're doing math and all of the other things that they have to do because they love this so much. So it's become a really integral part, maybe not every day, but of their week, that students are able to get in and do some writing on WriteReader. Some teachers say, I've made it our like free choice center because they have like must do's and can do's. They've said most of their students will pick this as their can do, and they're just writing. They're just over there, voluntarily writing during their free time, which is pretty awesome. And they've just got bookshelves full of all these student books, which is pretty cool. All of the student books you probably already noticed populate automatically on your bookshelf. So I'm here as a teacher. That one I just started is right there. But I do like that as soon as they start writing, it's going to show up on your bookshelf so you're able to view that and see. Another thing I really like is when I click on the students tab, I can click on a student's name and see. Sometimes I get a little overwhelmed with finding one particular kid's books. If I click on their name, it'll show me under that name then all of the books that that certain student has written. So that's kind of helpful. Because once they start writing a lot, this bookshelf gets really full, and you can't really sort it by students in that way. So that's a good little tip to know, to be able to click on their name there. Overall, I loved this picture. I was in kindergarten and he was like, take my picture. He was so excited about what he had created. So they're thinking, they're creating, and they're writing. And I don't think we could ask for anything more than that. That's pretty awesome. There are some great resources and support on the WriteReader website. When you go to writereader.com and click on resources, you'll kind of see all of these little blocks here. Again, that's where I found some of those template books. Anytime they put up a new image bank, they put lots of writing prompts. So if you do have kids that are getting stuck and not sure what to write about, you can kind of give them a few of those prompts out of there to get their imaginations flowing. There's some lesson plans, blog posts, and videos that have lots of just kind of little how-to sorts of things. And again, ideas from other teachers who are using WriteReader. And then that quick start guide is right here as well. If you need any help kind of getting started, getting your students signed in and all that good stuff.